We've got a really interesting agenda today, and we're going to start things off with discussing some items from under delegated authority. And Laura, you're gonna talk
I'll do
about
that.
Okay.
Yeah, unless you would like to do it instead.
No,
okay.
I'm not going to do it this time.
Okay. All right. The first item approved under delegated authority was two faculty manual revisions, and I'm going to do them the backwards from how they're listed. The first was an item about leave without pay. And this was precipitated by the fact that the faculty manual doesn't either allow or disallow us to put faculty on leave without pay involuntarily. So the AGO, in anticipation of having to put some faculty on leave without pay, once the October 18th deadline for vaccination or exemption had passed, inserted language about being able to put faculty on leave without pay in the case for legal or statutory reasons. And that led to a second revision to the summary suspension section, and the summary suspension is at the president's prerogative in an emergency situation, and we just wanted to distinguish that this was not a summary suspension, this was a leave without pay. Okay. Second. So that was the second minor revision. Great. Okay. The other information item is the change of the Women's Studies program to Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies. This was a planned change. It reflects our changing understanding of and research on sexuality, gender identity, and so on. And it's a national trend to change women's studies to a more comprehensive and inclusive title. So that's what that change was about. Any questions?
When would that go into effect?
Pardon me?
When would the name change go into effect?
I think right away.
Immediately after the board approval, or is there a process that you have to go through with the department or anything like that?
That process was apparently gone through.
It has been vetted already,
and
okay.
This was just catching up now that the program is in full.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, and this comes under our delegated authority for everybody, but not delegated authority to the president. So we just get briefed on these as opposed to needing to approve them.
Right. Okay.
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 And if I remember correctly, the revisions of the faculty manual, there really weren't any changes. There were clarifications to make make it very, very clear as to what was being stated in there. I don't see Danielle in here, but she's
right behind you.
Oh, she came in. Okay, but she was a large part of that clarification process. So.
Okay, you want me to go on to the
Yeah, let's go on to the academic affairs update.
So the academic affairs update is about the transformational change initiative, which began in 2016. It was one of the strategic reallocation grants from that year, 5 of which went to research programs, and this one went to student success. 2 proposals were submitted for the student success, one from Connors and one from College of Arts and Sciences. These 2 proposals had complementary approaches and goals, so they were merged and granted as a single program. The PIs for those grants, for this grant were PIs were Sam Swindell, who is the Associate Dean for Academic Assessment in College of Arts and Sciences, Bill Davis, who replaced the original one, who's the Vice Provost, and me. The goals of this grant were to increase protective factors and decrease risk factors that might lead either to poor academic performance or failure to continue on, attrition out of college. We identified risk and protective factors that were related to risk behaviors and to student retention, and selected evidence-based strategies to enhance those protective factors and reduce the risk factors. There were 3 components and 3 different touch points: parents, faculty, and direct intervention with students. The Handbook for Parents was the first one. It was delivered in the summer as families were preparing for students' transition to college to parents of first-year students. The second, faculty training in evidence-based approaches that increase student resilience and retention. And the third was direct programming with students delivered by instructors in large entry-level classes and trained peer facilitators. And I'll say a little bit more about each of these components, but say from the outset the results from all 3 components were exciting and, well, really exciting. Start with the parent handbook because that was the first one chronologically. Parents are underutilized in supporting students as they move here and get here to university, to WSU. And in fact, many parents get the explicit message to back off and not to be helicopter parents, both from the media and also directly by university administrators. I don't know if any of you had that experience when your kids went to college, but I did.
Yeah.
There's also very little guidance for parents for helping students as they really enter this young adult age and more autonomy at a time when they're losing support, their support systems, their habits, their friends, and so on. But research shows that students continue to rely on parents a great deal for guidance and support, that some of them feel like when their parents got the message to back off and did, they actually wished that their parents would engage more with them, even though they say, even though I wouldn't have admitted it then, that's what I wished when I went away to college. And the benefits of parental guidance and support for students before, during, and after their transition are clear in the research. And there are specifically 3 roles that are very important for parents, and these are the ones that we described in the handbook. One is coach, and the handbook helps parents navigate the tricky territory of supporting students' growing autonomy without totally letting go and without being totally controlling. A second role is safety monitors. It's important for parents to check in on the health and risk behaviors of students, to ask how they're sleeping. Are they getting good meals? Are they partying? And in this role, they can set clear expectations and communicate them about what they expect students to be doing at college. Doesn't mean they'll do them, but it does minimize. Research shows that when parents say, "Hey, are you partying on a Thursday? And what strategies do you have to protect yourself? And are you going with friends?" That it actually significantly reduces drinking and other risk behaviors. And the third role is cheerleader. The encouragement, the support, the reminding students of their strengths, expression of love and connection are all important. As an example of one of the interactive exercises that the handbook has, parents and their student get 2 sets of cards. They're identical sets, but they have different colors. They all have, each card has a value on it. And separately, the parent and the student sort those values into most important to me, important, and then less important to me. And then they come back together and discuss them. And this, we do this, first of all, because research shows that when students are able to focus on values, particularly Regent Dickinson, when it's 2 women in a physics class of 80 men, that the stereotype threat, which creates anxiety, is reduced if they focus on their values and their reasons for being there. So it also helps parents have discussions about where their kids' values are different, and students to see that their parents have values that may be different from theirs. So it's hard to open that kind of a conversation with an 18-year-old just cold. But these cards and other exercises like that facilitate important conversations.
So Laura, along those three things there, then is there a discussion, because where the back off or it's time to let your child go, or that begins in the process when you start to tour college campuses.
Sure.
And your child at that point, a lot of parents are doing that when they're around their junior year of high school. Mm-hmm. So that messaging starts in their campus tours, and then it really gets reinforced, having 3 in college right now. It gets really enforced when you go to do the onboarding or your official kind of welcome day to whatever campus. And I have 3 at 3 different campuses. And so it's been interesting because it is a cultural thing that you would probably, beyond the handbook, you need to actually change the messaging and the tone around coach, safety mentor, cheerleader years before they're actually arriving at college.
Right. That's a really great point. And we did do a version of the parent handbook as a presentation in the Alive orientation days for parents. We had to stop doing that because in addition to the Transformational Change Initiative grant, we got an NIH grant to do a randomized control trial of this, and so we couldn't have it contaminated.
Okay.
But we will continue to do that, and we're also talking about the idea of implementing some of this during visiting. Yeah, I totally agree. Although the handbook is not about substance use, we believe, based on research, that helping parents adopt this parenting framework would lead to decreased substance use during the transition to college, which is a super high risk period for drinking and accidental death and injury. So our supplementary grant allowed us to test this. We had 600 students whose parent received the handbook, 300 control students, and we surveyed them their last semester in high school, right after they got here, their first semester, and every semester then through the second semester sophomore year. And here are some of the results, and let me just see if I can orient you a little bit to this grant. The red or crimson is its handbook students, the gray is control students. This is the outcome is 30-day past 30-day alcohol use. Have you had anything to drink in the past 30 days? Any alcoholic? This is the spring in high school, and you can see that the handbook students who were randomly assigned just happened to be a little bit higher in the percentage of students who reported drinking, but not significantly higher. Look what happens when students go to college. It's a really pretty shocking increase, and but the students whose parents got the handbook were significantly less likely in their first semester to report past 30-day drinking. So the prevalence was significantly lower for the handbook group, and that difference actually grew over the course of their first 4 semesters. At the end of their spring semester, that difference had gone up to 10%. Same pattern for students' 30-day cannabis use. Fewer students use in the spring of high school. It more than doubles in the first semester at WSU, and then by the 4th semester, it grows a little bit more. But again, there's a pretty big difference and statistically significant difference between the two groups. So it's really hard to show effects with substance abuse prevention. So these surprised us. We believed that we had empirical and theoretical support, but didn't really expect to see such a good consistent results also over binge drinking, co-use of marijuana, and drinking, which is a really high-risk behavior, and other outcomes. So the second component was called LIFT. This is the faculty development component. LIFT stands for Learn, Inspire, Foster, and Transform. This is a faculty fellowship. It's competitive. Faculty apply, and when they are accepted, they commit to doing 4 days of workshops that teach them best practices to help students have a growth mindset instead of a fixed mindset, so that students can take an approach of, this is really hard, I failed this test, what do I need to do to fix it? Instead of, this is really hard, I failed this test, I'm a failure, I can't do it. A sense of belonging, which has been shown to be strongly related to retention. And then values-based decision-making. And we also teach mindfulness, teach faculty how to incorporate mindfulness into their classes, which can also help students be aware of unhelpful thoughts and reduce them. So students agree to do those workshops. They also agree to implement what they've learned and changing their syllabi for the next semester's course, to observe other LIFT fellows as they're implementing, and to be observed. So far, this was last year, 120 faculty fellows have gone through it, almost 10,000 students across 2 years, in 55 departments, 9 colleges, and 4 campuses. Most of the classes are large entry-level classes, so where the sense of belonging especially is hard to foster without explicitly addressing it. So faculty learn techniques to do this. Many faculty who go through the fellowship report that their teaching is revitalized, that they feel more excited about teaching. And then
just stop you for there. I have a question actually for Dave on this, from a faculty perspective, and your colleagues. I mean, is this something in full transparency? Is it truly something that most faculty embrace or have a mindfulness around? I mean, there's a lot being asked of a faculty member, right? And first and foremost, it's to educate and teach a course, and then there's all these other ancillary things. So where do you think the mindset of faculty is at this point around something like this?
Do you have an opinion on it?
Because as a parent, I would have probably a very different opinion. But I mean, truly. So,
well, I'll let Dave say. The faculty who apply for this,
are committed.
They're committed. Mm-hmm. But the first year that we did it, we got commitments from chairs for faculty who probably would not have committed to it.
Okay.
And most of them, so, the classic curmudgeon who's been teaching for 40 years in chemistry class of 600 kids.
Right.
Who reported a total transformation of the way they thought about teaching.
Okay.
Because this creates a context that helps students learn. And so that's my experience with the LIFT fellows. Dave?
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know that I can really comment on that. I don't have any experience with this. And I don't feel comfortable speaking for the faculty at large. I just don't have my finger on that.
Yeah.
I'm hopeful.
Should it be faculty-wide? I was really curious. When I went to college, we were assigned a faculty member. And it helped a lot. I mean, the issue, you could talk both about school and very personal things. I mean, when you're 18 and you think you know everything and you break up with somebody for the first time, being able to go to a faculty member who's pretty academic, but also will say to you, relax, I mean, that relationship was really important, and it has continued. People who came through Central Washington at my age are still contributing to Central Washington because we believe they made our life. Mm-hmm. They made our life. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I see this and I don't know whether it's the same thing, whether or not if I was a student here, whether I would feel strongly enough to say, for the rest of my life, I'm going to make sure I send money to my university because they got me through it. Is that what this was for, or is it?
Well, it's to help approach that when you're teaching a class of 600 students, so that you're not on autopilot, so that you are being
Right, the student
authentic and
experience.
mindful in the way
Yeah.
that you approach it. And I think it does help students come, for example, to see faculty when they're troubled, because those faculty members are mindful and present and
Right.
addressing them as humans, not as a bunch
Yeah.
of faces in an
Yeah.
audience.
Were the students queried about anything, or was it just the faculty members?
Most of the faculty fellows in the first couple of years did assessments. We don't have the capacity right now to analyze those data, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute.
Okay.
Yeah. Launch is the student involvement in high impact opportunities, some of which make those direct connections with faculty, for example, undergraduate research. And with Launch, we help students identify their goals, their personal values, and their strengths, and then use those, they call it the GPS, and use that to help map out their 4 years, hopefully 4 years in college, with high impact practices such as undergraduate research, capstone courses, internships, and service learning, and others. All of these are shown to increase retention. Launch is delivered in the context of large classes, again, large entry-level classes, trio programs, and then peer mentors, some of whom have been through Launch, help students individually with their plans, which of course will probably change over time, but this helps give them a long-term view of what they're trying to do. So far, Launch has touched 2,200 students across the first 2 years in 40 departments and 9 colleges. And our outcome for these courses was retention. For these 2 components was retention. So again, the red is in this one, the lift students, in this one, the Launch students. Regent Powell, I did put the label there, but I mislabeled it. So this, this should be, TCI students. So you can see at the beginning, of course, everybody's 100% because and these are freshmen, all freshmen. And right from the beginning, right from the get-go, from that place where we have students drop off between first and second semester, we have a sizable difference between those who were exposed to at least one class taught by a LIFT fellow versus those who were not. And that difference is maintained and increases a little bit over time. Launch, we have fewer years data because it took longer to set Launch up, but we see the same pattern in the first semester, from the first semester to the second semester of retention. So we presented these data to Provost Chilton, President Schultz, and Stacy Pearson, and made the argument that these data are compelling enough that we would like to see this institutionalized and scaled up. And they agreed and have agreed to continue on that same budget. We'll use that budget not to be training and supporting faculty who will be trainers of trainers, for example, who will train other people in the evidence-based approaches, and we'll hire an assessment person partly to look at what student outcomes are beyond retention, but also to look and see where we have equity gaps in all of these components. And if we do, what we need to adapt in order to reduce those equity gaps, whether it's between men and women in science, between Black and white students in, a large undergraduate course of any sort, first-gen students versus other students. So that will happen. The healthcare authority heard me presenting about the student handbook results a year or so ago and got really excited about it, and have given us $200,000 to disseminate it to universities across the state. Parents love the handbook. I mean, not all of them do, but we get a lot of feedback saying this made us feel like WSU actually really cares about us. So that was fun. The retention data would represent, if those patterns are replicated when we scale up to 70%, a conservative estimate of annual savings in tuition is about $7.5 million. So that's our goal, to get to that many students, and we'll begin the scale up in 2022. Any questions?
Quick question.
I have a
I may have
hand.
said this, but I.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, sorry. I was going to ask if I could have a handbook. I have a new freshman.
Yes.
Data is compelling, so I would love to
Yeah.
see one of your cases.
Sure. I'd be happy to, and I have to say, as a parent, it's actually kind of fun to do.
Yeah, that's very cool. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So you may have mentioned this and I missed it. When this all started, you said there was a grant. The grant was from where?
In 2016, the central administration scooped back a certain amount of money from all units. And that money, part of that money, and this was when I think Dan Bernardo was acting president.
I missed that process.
So part of that money was distributed into grants.
Okay,
They were
so it's an
competitive, and this
internal
was
grant.
one of the grants that was funded.
Well, it certainly has borne fruit, and it
Yeah,
looks like it puts WSU in a strong leadership position statewide
Mhm.
for really helping students throughout the state, which I think is a great land grant achievement, and certainly a feather in WSU's cap.
I hope so. And I should say that the handbook was developed in collaboration with a group of UW colleagues. So it really represents a statewide effort from the
That's
two main
great.
universities. Yeah.
It's even better.
Great.
Any other questions?
No, thank you.
I think
Good
wonderful. Thank you
presentation.
very
Appreciated it.
Okay. Our next up is the Office of Research update and a very interesting associated presentation and discussion.
Okay, okay.
You need to point to anything on the slide, just move the mouse a little bit, make sure.
Yeah, we'll just advance it like that. Okay. Okay, so turn this on. Okay, good afternoon. So good to see you again, Chris Keene, our Vice President for Research. I'm joined today by Tom Kula.
Hi, everyone.
Yes, thank you, Tom. So actually, Tom, maybe you want to introduce yourself briefly at this point, just to the group, the Allen School,
Sure.
in your history.
Sure.
I think.
Happy
People
to.
appreciate understanding that.
Sure. My name is Tom Kula. I'm the director of the Paul Allen School for Global Health. I came to WSU from University of North Carolina, where I spent the first 25 or so years, we'll just say a lot of years, of my early career as a microbiologist working in infectious disease research. And then I was recruited to Washington State to take over the director position at the Allen School. And I'll talk a little more. I'll try, when we talk about our award, I'll give a little bit of background, maybe about the Allen School, why it was launched, and how it sort of has morphed into something I think is quite exciting. Yeah.
Quite spectacular. And you've heard about some of the work at the Allen School before. So today, actually, we just had a short update on some recent awards, and then Tom is going to spend some time on a recent award from USAID, $125 million, which is the largest award that WSU's ever received. So I'll do a quick intro, and then we'll do a deep dive on the USAID. Okay, that's what I just said. That's the agenda. Okay, so first of all, here's just a little piece of good news, which I think we can talk some more about the details on this over time. But this is a picture of our total awards by sponsor type from FY16 through FY21. Okay, and you can see it's been marching up nicely, okay, despite the fact that our tenure, as Dave knows, our tenure track faculty numbers have been dropping. And as you've heard in previous meetings, this is awards, it's not expenditures, right? That's minor detail. But our expenditures number per faculty is amongst the highest of our aspirational peers, right? About 350K. So you can see, looking at this trend, that, Blue and Federal obviously has been growing nicely. And you can see there are other components there. Colleen, please chime in on this as we talk through these as you wish, of course. So, this is, I'll talk about the big picture trend in a minute, but what we want to do is give a quick overview of these numbers here. Then we're going to show some examples of some recent large awards. So, Tom, please comment, but I would say there's sort of a number of reasons why we're seeing this trend. Okay. First of all, we're actually, we are getting better with large awards. The faculty, of course, that lead these things are getting more knowledgeable and skilled in awards generally, and I would say large awards in particular, right? When you look at the big picture trends, okay, AB, we're learning how to support folks better, right? Post-award, pre-award, filling out budgets, helping with the narrative, government relations, other aspects that we do this. So our ability to support the faculty has gone up. And then actually, we've also invested in things with dollars, via seed grants or research initiatives or college funds, or, other things that we've done internally, donor funds. And so, and this is a longer talk, which you might want to see, but, there's the short summary is research and investment works, okay, pays off. The only question is how much, okay. And, I think the university's experience in the big picture is seed grants are probably our best return in pure dollars. They typically return 25 or 30 to 1. Okay. And, one of a great example of that is some of our work in digital humanities that, Kim Kristen has done. We've brought in $4 million in that area, including two major foundation awards from Mellon. That's right, two Mellon awards. $4 million total in that area. And it all came from a 12 or 15K seed grant that Kim got when she started at WSU. So the seed grants are like rocket fuel for research, actually. Then we also do bigger investments, both centrally and within the college, and they generally work too. Gene editing for livestock, which you've heard about, right? That was started as a particular program, right? We invested in that, and now that's well into the green in terms of just financial ROI. So we can talk in the big picture about how to grow the enterprise, but basically, I think we've collectively gotten better at getting these awards. We support folks better, and we've invested, and so the results are I think evident. Okay, so I won't get into so that's sort of a future me if you'd like to hear it. Let me just now talk about a couple of the awards in particular, and then we'll turn to Tom's. So this first one is an award in digital agriculture, which is a joint program between NSF and USDA. NSF regularly launches these rounds of artificial intelligence institutes. This round, which we were awarded several months ago, was one of 11 awarded. Okay. And our PI on this is Ananth Kalyana and VCA and EES, VCEA EE. And basically, if you look at what's going to be done in here, sort of three main things. It's bringing artificial intelligence to agriculture, and if you think about where does the data come from, one obvious place is images, right? We have an enormous amount of data, obviously, with crop yields and characteristics per acre, but geospatial imaging, drones. We have water use. We have an enormous amount of data, which this project will basically crunch on and provide sort of three things. One, much better integrated modeling of our ag ecosystems, and two, the other two are really exciting. One is decision support on the ground right away for the farmer, right? What do I plant this year? How much water do I put on? It's that kind of a thing. And then also there's a whole piece to build and develop human tools that the farmer can use really right there, not just for decisions, but also real time, to help, produce an optimum mix of crops for there. So it's really just juicing up our, how we do ag by applying big data and machine learning and AI to it. Some of the things that are looked at in detail, things like water allocations, also just trying to help the labor force actually be a lot more effective and efficient. right? So this is a major effort here. There's also been state investment that Colleen can talk about, which played a big role in this, and Soils to Society, as we'll talk about in a minute. So anyway, that's one example of a big recent grant. Now, this is really a real feather in our cap. It's a major NSF institute. These are super competitive. And it's just great for the university to get one of these.
Chris, can I
Yeah.
make a comment there? Just to reinforce that Earth observation data,
Yes.
that field is going to just grow
Yes, right.
exponentially. And the analogy would be like, rewind the clock 30 years ago, none of us thought we would care about social networks. And going into the future, Earth observation data and AI, especially from satellite networks, is going to be a natural high demand aspect. And so to the extent that you can connect also to NASA and the space agencies, I think there's an opportunity to connect some dots there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, using satellite imaging is a significant part of this project. Yeah, absolutely. Those connections
Let's
are super
chat
important.
afterwards. Yeah.
Pardon?
Let's chat afterwards.
Okay, great.
I have more stuff for you.
Regent Sims, right? Yeah.
We, in this new world that's being created very rapidly, do we ever look at opportunities in countries which are doing much worse, but could use this technology? I mean, I was just going through my.
Yes.
The answer is yes.
We get the
The
right
answer is
guy.
yes, yeah.
Get the right guy here.
Because my sense would be from speeches that Bill Gates is now giving, he's really in the mood to actually deal with some of the underlying issues of overseas issues of hunger,
Mhm.
disease, lack of water. And I was sitting here thinking, God, this would be a perfect grant for him to fund because no one else is doing this. And he's been crying out loud for 2 years now saying, there's got to be a technology other than what we have here that could do that. I was just thinking, wow, that would be a perfect discussion to have with him because he wants to,
Yeah.
he's really sees this as incredibly impactful. And he's more worried, according to my neighbor, that if it doesn't get addressed, the world will go down a slide that's going to be difficult to stop.
Right.
And the end result of that's is going to be really tragic worldwide. So I just was thinking, wow, we're asking for 20 million. I think it would be worth talking to them. Is this as much money as you're getting right now?
Yeah, this is the single award for 20, it's 5 million a year, 4 or 5 million a year for yeah.
Well, I'd like to see this taken to scale at a level that
Yeah.
would be just mind blowing.
So I don't know if Colleen is listening over there. I know she's listening. She's always listening. This is a topic of conversation around a lot of the university. I think a lot of us are trying to think again across a lot of these disciplinary boundaries that have tended to sort of, people tend to stay in their own shop a little bit. And it's a grant like this that has really helped bring people together and start thinking a little bigger about how a technology in one area can apply to another. And then in my shop, we're a global health group, and we're very much engaged in under-resourced countries and best ways to mitigate hunger, nutrition, as well as infectious disease research that we do. A lot of what we are spending and learning more and more about is listening when we're in these places instead of prescribing. And I think there's been a lot of prescribing, and there's been a lot of technologies that have been developed that people have gone over and said, this is what you need, and we're trying to adjust that conversation a little bit. But that whole idea of this is an area that we want to invest in, I think it's something like this that really gets us started, where we can actually have some credibility at that, at that table, that we're already working collectively and not just sort of independently, so groups.
Yeah.
It's a big first step to, to get that audience. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
And needed. It's so needed.
Will the USAID get into any of that? Not this particular one?
Well, not ours. Ours will take us other important places, but yeah.
Not that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Okay, great. So let's see another example. So this is a recent award that we got from USDA called Soil to Society. Okay, and it's really about the whole integrated system, soil to crop to food, with the goal of really improving nutrition for people writ large, right? It's based on, to my comment earlier, on certain internal investments. So this was one of the strategic investment projects, Laura, as you know, 10 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, that built on a base. We got some state funds, with Chris and Colleen's group which has contributed to this enormously. And that sort of built us up to the level where we could compete for this one effectively, right? And so this project is basically about that entire integrated loop. One of the fun things about what we do in soil tends to be very fundamental, right? It's actually some really cool stuff and just sort of the science of soil and nutrients and how do you keep the soil, what's the effective match of a soil to a given crop. It is, by the way, Laura, a potential good collaboration with PNNL, which we haven't yet explored because they're actually quite interested in fundamental soil science as well. But anyway, so again, we're very excited to get this one. The PI is Kevin Murphy and Connors, who's just a wonderful guy. It's a great team. You can see all these things are big team grants. But again, the end goal is to enhance the nutritional value of things like barley, wheat, peas, lentil, quinoa, et cetera, by working the whole chain, soil, crop to food.
I think it might be interesting as thinking about future things to actually have a briefing on what's going on in that whole soil arena, because it's of great interest to the legislature, and there's more and more work that we're doing. So I think it might be worth a presentation.
Okay. So it's sort of like Tom's going to do on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just so we sort of understand what we're doing and how it plugs in.
Well, I'm sure Kevin, the PI would be glad to come out and give a talk on this. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so again, these are examples, right? So you can always do follow-up on these, right? The next one is an award that we associated with basically rivers, watersheds, and communities. This is an NSF award. It's so-called NRT. It's a traineeship program, which is a very prestigious thing to get. And this is the first such traineeship award we've gotten. I don't know if it's ever, but it's in a very long time. From NSF, and I'll talk about what that means in a minute. But the focus is on rural river watershed communities, right? And it's basically those entire ecosystems. It incorporates a lot of things. Obviously, aspects of climate change, equitable outcomes, ecosystem health. But the other thing that's unique about it is the training piece. In addition to just training students to do thesis research, there are actually, I've got some notes here, there are actually 25 designated trainees that are paid by the grant. That besides doing their research, will get special instruction and teamwork, ethics, leadership, quantitative skills, really broad career skills other than just the research piece, right? So that's one of the very exciting things about this is the broad training. So there's 25 traineeships paid directly by the grant, and there's another 20 which will be enabled by the award itself, which are paid by sort of existing RAs or other grants, okay? And then there's other mentoring, other things that spill off around the department, right, and the unit. So this is just actually a tremendous way to train our workforce in addition to being a great project, right? And so and Jan is the current director of our Center for Environmental Research, Education, and Outreach. I should have spelled that out. Sorry, that's CEREO. CEREO has been one of our long-standing centers at WSU. It's been a real focus for our work in ecology and the environment and related science.
Now, who are going to be our trainees?
Well, students largely that we sign up. Yeah, it's just that think of it as student training with a much broader, but much broader than traditional. Okay. And I'm sorry. Also, there are also some other community folks that are sort of that last category mentioned, direct NRT funded students. Then there's other students that use NRT capabilities. Then there's broader training to community leaders and other collaborators that go with us. Oh. This is a very broad collaborative effort. Not just universities, but industry and also local. All these things have a large community. A real broad range of involvement. Because a lot of these things I'm talking about, this one and the next one in particular, also have a strong focus on equitable outcomes.
Oh, okay, great.
To the discussion we had earlier. Yeah.
I see the Center for Civic Engagement there. Is there a connection to the Stormwater Center?
Oh, it's a good
Y'all
question. I imagine there must be, given the subject of watersheds and rivers and toxicology and
Yeah.
its effect on the ecosystem. Yeah, but I don't know actually.
Okay.
But I would imagine so.
Well, that's highly lauded in the Puget Sound
Yeah, right.
as a
right.
benchmark partnership with WSU, the Nature Conservancy, and other,
Right.
groups. And so I hope they would be part of it.
I would think so. I can check though, Reggie. Yeah.
Just a question.
Yeah, for sure.
Russell Foundation funding it. The Russell Foundation help fund some of that.
Okay. Okay. So that's a third one. This is another example. Again, it's actually, so the PI here is Julie Podowski, who's to the discussion earlier, is recently tenured, outstanding and female faculty member. She's also part of our CIRIO group, the Center for Environmental Research, Education, and Outreach. This is a grant where Julie is not the PI, but it's a $15 million effort total headed up by UNM. But it's such an exciting project, we wanted to tell you about it. And basically, it's all about sort of the rural urban systems and the rural urban ecosystem and sustainability. So it has a lot to do with some things that Julie's worked on before, a couple of particular things, sort of the food, energy, water interconnection, and also fire, right? And so there's involvement here as well. They're not listed in major partners, but just one of the things we're developing. The University of Idaho actually has quite a lot of strength in fire, actually, and that's some of the things we're developing. But this is basically about sustainable cities and, with both the rural and the urban environment nearby. A lot of engagement here with community partners and NGO and equitable outcomes for everyone involved, all the way from the folks in the center city, as it were, all the way out into the more rural areas. So there's a lot of focus on equitable outcomes in terms of impacts on ecosystems on this one here. And long-term sustainability in the Mountain West. So another NSF award. It's a great example, by the way, of this thing that NSF has now labeled convergence. So if you actually read the solicitation for this, you would see that it says you need to talk about the convergent nature of your work. That's a buzzword for interdisciplinary, all right? And it's a buzzword for focused on things like equitable outcomes and engagement across a wide variety of stakeholders. So you can see these grants are really very broad. They're a lot different than traditional super narrow grant or whatever. But it's great to see us get these things because they require that integration across many disciplines.
Well, if I could just comment on this one.
Yeah.
So I've sat on the board for the Nature Conservancy in Washington for almost a decade, and the discussion and the conversations are similar in terms of strengthening, building partnerships. But that whole idea of convergence and not starting from zero and being in your own little swim lane and inviting everybody to form the solution it's really cool. So
right.
It's exciting for me. Thank you.
Well, and that's where a lot of the sponsors are going, right? You read about this. If you look at even USDA, right? There's a tendency to have fewer, larger awards and more multidisciplinary, right? And that's been a huge emphasis out of NSF, right? Increasing emphasis out of other agencies. Okay, and then now we come to the one we wanted to highlight in a little more detail, which is the USAID. So go ahead, Tom.
Thanks. Thanks for having me and having this chance to talk to you a little bit. You can, yours has got a better, you at least had a picture on it. I was on the road when Chris said I need to make a slide, sitting there on a phone, and it was not, not my best effort. So I think what I wanted to do is maybe just give just a little bit of background about, I think, how we got to the point where we became competitive for something like this, and just around really the culture and the mission of the Allen School, which you all know is pretty new. I think from university standards, we've been around 11 years now, I think. And it was formed in the College of Veterinary Medicine as to fill a recognized gap in research, and that is that connection between animal health and human health. People have talked about a lot. I'm sure you've all heard the One Health terminology, that all the health of all the planet is actually interconnected, from ecosystem to animals to humans to the environment, and the people, we've talked about this a lot, but actually acting in that area has been maybe a little slower than we may have hoped. And that's a lot of why the mission of the Allen School and the formation was to do interdisciplinary research. Or now, so what was the word now? I missed out that it's a new buzzword. Yeah, to do convergent research in this area. Traditionally, we would have microbiologists like myself that are studying infectious disease, and then you go to another department and you would talk to economists and who might think about health economies and impacts on health and the impacts on the economies of people. And our vision was to incorporate more of those different disciplines and sort of look at health in a much more interdisciplinary way. And also within an international footprint, recognizing there are significant needs, not only in our state, but then also in poor resource countries, that there's a lot of connections between, if you think about rural health is an international issue. And it's a local issue, but it's also an issue abroad. So as we set up the way in which we do research at the Allen School, we set up with a little bit of a different model. Traditionally, people might do international research. They would parachute in with a project, recognize a problem in a developing country, perform a research project on that, engage the community, and then come back out. We have faculty that are planted in different places around the world. So we have 4 faculty that live and work in Kenya and Tanzania. And through that, we try to establish this idea that we are here, that we're partners, and we partner in our research. We, as I mentioned earlier, we engage with the community, find out needs, find out their thoughts on what issues are, work with existing scientific community there, engage in helping to train scientists in these communities, work with the government agencies, work with the government labs, local universities, and whatnot. So over the past 6 or 7 years, we've built, particularly in Kenya and Tanzania, we are particularly strong there, but we're doing similar things in Guatemala and in Bangladesh now as well. But it's in that type of research that I think we've gained a pretty good reputation of being good partners in these countries where we've been working. So when we saw this opportunity to apply for this, so it's not a grant. So this is a cooperative agreement. So we saw this opportunity. It very much aligned with our culture and our philosophy on how to do research, but it also provided an opportunity to do capacity building within low resource countries. So the focus of this work is to work in specific. There will be 12 countries in total eventually. Right now, we only have 5, and I still don't think I'm allowed to say who they are. This is a whole other thing we can talk about. But we know there will be in Africa, Asia, and in Latin America, and so those we know will be in those 3 areas. So when we put in the proposal, we partnered with other groups that we knew had similar philosophies on how to conduct the research. That is, again, alongside the communities and within the countries in which they work. So you see on Chris's slide, PATH, FHI 360, University of Washington. These are all groups that have strengths in areas in different countries in the parts of the world that we want to work. The proposal is, or the project is to go into areas of high risk spillover of virus pathogens that are endemic in animal populations, and an area where there's an increased risk for them to be transmitted to people and then cause zoonotic disease. And I don't have to explain, after the last 2 years, I used to have to explain this a lot. I don't have to explain any of this to anyone in this room, I'm sure, about the consequences and the importance of this. We are at a point scientifically where we can start to recognize signatures usually by sequence or an implied protein analysis on viruses that give them the higher potential to be able to actually cause infection in people. Usually we look at through very like minimal numbers of mutations, that they're very close to being actually through minimal numbers of mutations, being able to potentially infect human cells. So the goals of this research is we'll first identify high risk areas. And these tend to be areas where the ecosystem is changing. There's increasing connections where people are coming into more frequent contact with wild animal populations, which are also coming into more contact with domestic animal populations. So you got this mix in these areas, and that mixing is new. And that tends to be the areas where you get spillover of virus from one group to another. And as that moves, then they become potentially another step closer to causing disease in humans. So that's the science. And that's the thing we were very strong on, is that science with our partnership. So we'll be identifying those, and we'll be looking at the virus populations and looking for potential high risk spillover events. Along with that, as I mentioned, USAID, they're a development agency. So we're committed to doing this work and training local scientists and building the capacity in each country that we go to. So when we go into that country, again, we're not coming in, getting into the local community, doing the work ourselves, and then taking it back. So a lot of time is going to be spent with developing the capacities within these countries. Data management is a big concern. So one of the criteria are when we negotiate with a country, they have to be willing to share data. Just like we're saying, we will share data back. It's not the data won't be possessed, and that has tended to be one of the big problems over the years of being able to actually analyze this kind of information. People become kind of possessive of the information and don't really want to share it. I know Laura knows what I'm talking about. So we have to get those commitments up front. I'm almost certainly aware that this is a fairly politically charged environment in which we find ourselves working. So we have been assigned from USAID. They have a communications person, and they required us to have a professional communications person. And some of you may know Laura Lockard, so she worked with Colleen and the president's office, and so she is the communications person for this project for us, and she works intimately with the USAID communications person. I mentioned it's a cooperative agreement. I just want to explain that for just a second. A lot of what Chris has talked about is grants, where they put in a proposal, said this is what we want to do. They reviewed, they really like it, and they say, okay, well, here's the grant funds, and then let's see what your outcomes are. We are 50-50 partners with USAID. We meeting with them weekly. We'll probably be meeting with them more. They have a group that's dedicated to this project. We have a group that's dedicated to this project, and we're working together. They do a lot of the work up front with the countries, where we navigate that before we start projects. This is kind of a new area for them. We're helping them understand things like biosecurity and doing this kind of biology safely. So cooperative agreements take a lot more work, and a lot more work from Chris's group when we talk about compliance and the way money is spent, and Stacy's group as well, right? So I think. But I'll stop babbling and answer questions. I bet.
Well, I guess I'd just add to just that your last comment about cooperative agreements.
Yeah.
I did some of those in my prior life, but they're a sign of maturity, right? That those are vehicles by which the government sends significant amounts of money over time, right? And once they're open, they tend to stay open.
It's a lot of negotiating. Yeah,
they get renewed. Yeah.
In your process, I mean, one of the big challenges in Central Africa and portions of Asia is you're asking people to discontinue eating their food source. So how do you address the fact that people say,
"Yep,
this is my meal today," and you want to take it away because and is US what is your strategy to say here's
this is a great question. We actually have we work with anthropologists. It's easier up front. that is a problem and an issue. What's great for us is that's not we are right on the detection and the characterization and the potential finding of high spillover potential pathogens. The USAID is, I mean, there's parts of us that would love to work on that aspect of it as well, but that's not our mission. They use this word a lot, mission. This is our mission. They've actually said, you need to stay in your lane on this, So we have a very sort of clear set of experiments and work that we're going to do. That is not in the purview of this. But I mean, you're absolutely right. As soon as you identify something, then you have a cultural problem, right?
I find it fascinating that Asia is on the list there. And I'm assuming that there's reasons why you can't name the countries. But do you believe that really kind of the duration of the 5 years is enough time to do the work that you hope to accomplish?
Well, the part of this, a lot of what we're doing is doing the risk analysis, and we will identify those high risk areas.
Yeah.
And I guess in one sense, there's always this possibility that you're working in these high risk areas, but there's this one over here that you aren't in, and that's where you have a problem. But part of the goal is in developing this work, there'll be ways that we'll learn that we can do is faster and easier, and that can translate to other places as well. Even though I can't name the countries, what I will stress again is that requirement for openness and data sharing, that in the absence of that, we don't go there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm
A
sorry.
question, go ahead.
Oh, just quick clarification. I must have missed it. Is WSU the lead coordinating entity?
Yes, we are the lead. Yes,
Yeah.
we are the lead, and we have a great partner. We have great partnerships. It's a great consortium of people. One of the first things I learned in working with USAID, they said, yes, you might have a great consortium. They're your problem. We want to talk to you. So we're the ones at the table doing the negotiating with USAID.
You're the corraler of the other partners.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so you just brought on a project manager for this, right? I mean, you've had to bring in significant.
Yeah,
management staff.
I've never hired so many people so fast in the WSU system.
How has that gone as far as finding the right talent for and?
So I will say for the director and deputy director, I think we scored. There were very kind of clear criteria for them, and the director we found, her name is Hannah Rabner. She actually lives in DC. She'll continue to live in DC, which is helpful for us because she has to go up to the Hill, and actually she'll end up talking to Congress on our behalf for these things. She has managed and worked with USAID for at least 5 or 6 years with another group. So kind of in a similar role. She had been working with a Beltway bandit for a while, but so she speaks their language really well. And there's parts of working with them that it helps to have someone who knows what they're doing. And our deputy director similarly has a little bit less experience, but he's actually managed some large infrastructure type projects. So he kind of brings more of kind of that laboratory expertise in there, along with that USAID experience that helps lead the projects. It's the working down their financial systems are really different from our financial systems. And I know we can do a good job. It's their coding and language is different from our coding and language. And we're kind of in a bit of a hurricane right now where every now and then I see the horizon and then it disappears, but we'll get there.
You'll find it. It's fascinating. It's outstanding.
I'm going to follow up on a question I asked during our pre-call, and that is about how this project might engage the medical school and other parts.
The vet school.
Of the vet school.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks for that. This is a lot of this. So what we learned, I'll just go back to our model when we started working in Kenya. We picked up projects there. There were more contracts where we would do some surveillance work and maybe develop some detection work and things like that. There's not a lot of scholarship around that. We recognize that. In some respects, you could look at something like this and say, there's not a lot of scholarship around that. But we did that strategically, to build teams and to engage with the communities when we were there. But that type of work tends to reveal projects. And there is scholarship down the road, I think, from that we have built into the budget some graduate student stipends and some training support, not just for in-country capacity building, but to develop some research projects within that. So our hope is, while we do the work that we're sort of assigned to do, that we've found that very often you will make discoveries that are yours. Just like you said, this issue you brought up, that's an issue that takes that will be revealed sort of by the discovery work we do. Now, how do we address that? Now you've got an issue of like scholarship where you can bring in other expertise and ask about that. So I think it will bring in a lot of other research opportunities.
Other
Go
questions?
ahead.
One of the things, when you're talking about the zoonotic diseases of transfer from animals to humans, what we've been seeing with COVID is that we're transferring from humans to animals.
Yep.
Then I wonder about some mutation then being transferred back to humans. Right now, they're saying they don't see, like with the tigers and so forth.
Yeah.
But I just,
that's
is that something you're going to sort of watch for?
Absolutely. And it's interesting you bring that up, because most of the people they're concerned about, well, all right, so we're going to go and we're going to collect a lot of fecal samples. This is not like very glamorous work, I guess, in some respects. And mostly people are concerned about when you collect those samples, if there's a highly infectious agent in there that so again, we're not digging anything up, but anytime you go to a source, an environmental source where there's potential for infectious agent, we think a lot about this. How do you handle that? You have to make assumptions. You have to assume that you have to handle this as if it's a highly infectious source, not after you discover it is. So we think a lot about how do you protect people when you do sample transport, how you protect the people, how do you contain those samples so that down the transport chain, there are no concerns about that. And thankfully, we have Waddle and Tim Basler, the director of the Washington Animal Disease Detection Lab. That's his world. He knows how to do that. And he knows how to think about transport and handling things like that. That's mostly what we think about. But people have brought up, well, now do we have more people coming into one of these? And are we going to be the vector for something that goes back and decimates an animal population? So we think about that too. So how do you go in and how do you protect the environment that you're going into in order to collect those samples? So it's the same mitigation strategies. Yes.
You're going to be in South America? What area?
I'll tell you as soon as I can. I promise.
It poses a much different problem because you're way inland. But Brazil is a very difficult, looks like Brazil, but maybe not. It's much more difficult. Coastal Brazil is one language. Interior Brazil is another.
Yeah.
Coastal Brazil is the dominating party that came in and warred against the people who now are the interior populations, and never the twain shall meet.
Exactly, yeah.
The cultural differences are really, really substantial. But I like what you're doing. I was just trying to figure out, I mean, you probably figure, you had the grant, is how to, I would say, create once you do this in some countries, it's easier to pick it up in others. When I worked for the feds, we went in with our own federal dollars. We went up to the UN and got a whole lot more, and the World Bank was very kind and generous. Yeah. So the idea was not, because what they didn't want is a sense that people were playing favors.
Yeah.
So, and they love funding success. So I hope that as you go through this process, you'll remember that you'll end up with a lot of cachet, and you'll get monies that you didn't, that people were sitting in because they were watching you. But once they know you're successful, will be more than glad to give it to you.
Mhm.
So I hope you don't see this as being a time limited. It's probably going to be a lot of fun for longer
Yeah.
than 5 years,
You
would be
know,
my impression.
we could, all we can say is, well, we know unless we really make a mess of it, we've got 5 years, but everyone, if we plan on doing a good job and we expect that we'll be able to grow in that, yeah.
You'll be
Yeah.
loved.
But you're right, every single country has got subpopulations, and if you're going into, it really matters what region you're going into, and there's a lot of upfront work of making sure that we work and meet with and develop relationships at that ground level with the people that we'll be working with. Yeah. That's not always straightforward.
A lot of these.
Thank
Go
you
ahead.
very much. I mean, this has been really very interesting, and we wish you the best.
Thank you.
We'd love to follow up, when
Yeah.
you get into the project more and can talk about where you're going to have it.
Yeah.
And just hear a little bit more, because I think this is just really path-breaking worldwide, but also for WSU, and I think it's just a really important project. And it's been delightful to hear about all these large grants and see the growth of the portfolio, because there for a while it wasn't looking like it was going to, with COVID and everything, that things were going to be a bit dire on some things, and yet we continue to grow the entire research portfolio. So I think that's really excellent.
Full credit to the faculty, right, Dave? So thank you.
Well, it's faculty,
Yeah, right.
a lot of things.
But they have to be supported. You need
But you
support.
talked
Yeah.
about the critical support.
Yeah, the support is important.
And I think going to what Laura reported on, in some of the ways that you can encourage, and train both faculty, get students engaged, and,
Right.
I think it all blends together for a stronger WSU. So
So I'm going to seize
Pardon me?
the opportunity to express an opinion, if that's okay. And you
Okay.
can fire me if not. I think one of the things, and well, it's because it goes to this point of like getting these bigger awards. Science is becoming more and more collaborative. And Chris mentioned, we used to, when we looked at faculty promotion and tenure in the sciences, we used to say, do they have an independent project? And you would they would get evaluated on whether or not had they been the principal investigator on a couple of R01s, and they've driven that through, got a couple of students out, and all their papers have 2 or 3 names on them. Science is more collaborative now. And I think I have a lot of people in the Allen School, and I say, I'm committed to supporting you and promoting you as being part of a team. We need to show the importance of each of those parts of the team. And that is somewhat of a change in how faculty get evaluated. We have to say, this is important. It's important. Eric Lofgren, he is intimately involved in 7 or 8 huge projects, right? And that has to be valued. And I think when we have that, and I think that's what we're trying to build, is the recognition of that. Then the young scientists feel the freedom to do that and not be concerned about whether or not they're going to have a job in 6 years.
Right. And it sort of goes to a discussion we had this morning about, how do you actually grow faculty if they have this barrier of the R01 award? It's a real challenge, because as you point out, the agencies are tending to go towards the collaborative grants, which means there's going to be less smaller individual grants, yet the collaborative way is definitely the way of the future and the way we need to go. So although it's not always easy, I'm sure, to hold these large consortia together, but anyway, I think it's something I think we all need to think about, and throughout academia. Really important and thought-provoking beyond just the topics we've been talking about.
I think these grants like this one especially are going to build infrastructure with the university, which will use way beyond the duration of this award.
I think we just doubled SBS.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Very good.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
All very good.
If you've got questions, you know how to find me.
All right. Okay, so this ends our committee meeting, and I believe we're starting. Right. Pardon me?
We'll have a 15-minute.
15-minute break, and then we'll start at 2:45.